Welcome back to Raised by Giants Illuminated Insights Discussion, bonus episode of the week on this amazing Sunday evening. I hope all of you all are well and welcome everyone in the chat. Good to see everyone. A reminder, super chats and super stickers are available. Also, PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description as well and are a great way to help support the show. And a big thanks to everyone that's contributed to help support my show. Really appreciate each and every one of you. So today we have returning guest, former U.S. Army Intelligence Security Command and Defense Intelligence Agency Directorate of Science and Technology, top secret psychic spy, remote viewer, and someone I consider a friend because he tells you exactly how it is, and he's been on the show several times. Welcome back to the show, David. It's good to see you, brother. How's things
brother.
going?
Thank you, Ryder. It's really good to be here.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about, man. There's always so much nonsense going on out here in the community. You know what I mean? People are constantly perpetuating a bunch of made up stuff. And, the top craze right now is UFOs and extraterrestrials. Everyone's talking about UFOs. They just had that giant congressional hearing in DC with Koresh coming out and saying that that we've retrieved extraterrestrial craft, and that sometimes along with that craft there's extraterrestrial bodies. What do you think is going on here, and what's happening with the whole UFO and extraterrestrial
That guy you're talking
government
about,
disclosure?
Yeah, that's the guy that this is the guy that has that everybody's calling a whistleblower. Is that it?
Yes, that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I've watched his just kind of his mannerisms and his listened to what he's had to say, and this just goes along, in my opinion, it just kind of with the inherent hysteria of the moment for us as people of the world, primarily Americans. There's kind of a malignant narcissism going on that manifests in all different variations of psychopathy, where you basically have the ability to say anything and nobody questions it, and then everybody runs to your defense, to protect you for something. And the thing that I have heard him say, which I don't hear repeated often enough, is he says, I know that this has happened, and I know that those things are there. And I've only heard one interviewer say, wait, you have personal knowledge of this? You've seen this? And his response would be, oh, no. Then how can you say that you know those things are there? Well, I have it on good authority from credible sources that I call friends in the community, which could be entirely made up, because I know that they have gone to some friends of his in the community.
Like Jeremy Corbell.
Yeah. And they have, they have assured everyone that his credentials are impeccable and that he's a really good guy and a quality worker, etc. But those are not the individuals that have told him that they've seen these things. So the people who are allegedly telling him that they have seen these things and they have personal knowledge, at least in as much as I followed it for, I just went like, yeah, get out of here. It was, I didn't see anybody come to his rescue to say, yeah, I'm the guy that told him that. I saw them. I actually touched this and I touched that, and I know it's there. So it then is just distilled down to one more individual standing up, garnering a great deal of attention, positive and negative, but attention nonetheless, which kind of feeds into my statement of this kind of malignant narcissism that people have, which is all I have to do is say something and it draws a crowd. And now I'm the talk of the town. I'm the talk of everywhere. And I'm that talk for as long as I can continue to make this happen. And if in this particular arena, we have seen this and manifest in various personalities that have come forward right across the spectrum. people claiming that they were swept up off the streets in, Washington, D.C. by the head of Army intelligence and whisked away to be interrogated by Air Force officers and CIA agents in hotels, which is just ridiculous, but they'll say it anyway. Again, I don't doubt that there could be some of these things around, but the idea that somebody just stands up and says, well, I have it on good authority. I have it on good authority from guys that I have taught remote viewing. Ron Blackburn, who I don't know if he's still alive, but he was an engineer at Lawrence Livermore Air Force Base, and he told me that he has seen those things. Okay, I have no reason to doubt him, but now let's just talk about whistleblowing. People don't understand that not everything that somebody does to come out and tell a story is whistleblowing. And you're not necessarily protected under the Whistleblower Act unless you meet certain criteria.
Yeah, that's what I try and explain to people that ask me all the time about you. And I say, well, Dr. David Morehouse almost got into a lot of trouble revealing the Stargate program and the psychic remote viewing before it was declassified, right? Would that be considered a whistleblowing act, or what was that considered?
No, that was what I thought was a noble act on my part, probably couched and wrapped up in a lot of thick blankets of stupidity in doing that. But I would do it again. I'm about 99% certain. I did it for an entirely different reason. And what I did could have very plainly, and I was very lucky. It was because of my military record that I probably wasn't prosecuted for dereliction of duty, wrongful disclosure of classified information, because that's in fact what I did. And I didn't try to do it with any sense of smugness or entitlement or like I'm saving the world because I'm doing it. I just thought that the technology was valuable enough that it should be given to the people of the world, that they should know what was possible with this. And the issue for me was just simply distilled down to that. That was my desire, was to do that. And I was willing to stand the consequences. And quite honestly, I didn't think the consequences would be as bad as they were. And that was just my naivete, I guess. I thought that I had established enough, currency, like just performance currency, credibility and currency, that social currency within the military organization, that they would not ostracize me and attempt to court-martial me and do other things, make all sorts of crazy allegations, which ultimately ended up being shown to be baseless, without merit, and no credible evidence. But nonetheless, the allegations were made, and therefore the allegations ended up being the things that detractors of my efforts like to hold up to everybody. But no, I was not doing it as a whistleblower, and it wouldn't see, whistleblowing very specifically has to be something that is in violation of the Constitution of the United States. It has to be waste, fraud, or abuse, and constituting a violation of taxpayer rights or of law. And that's what whistleblowing is for. Whistleblowing doesn't stand for guys like Snowden or Manning or even Morehouse to turn around and say, well, you know what? I know this is classified, but it's important to me to get it out there, so I'm going to throw it out there. If you do that, understand that you will be judged. And in that judgment, they will look at, does it fall under the statutes of the Whistleblower Act? And two, did you endanger the national security of the United States by revealing that information? Did you reveal sources? Did you do things that could get people killed because of what you've done? Those are the criteria that they look at. Now, this guy standing up and thumping his chest about, about which basically amounts to hearsay, that somebody else told him that that stuff exists. And so now he's claiming, I'm a whistleblower, you can't touch me, and I'm going to do that. Maybe under this current administration, he can get away with it. Under other administrations, far more conservatively focused, if you stepped out of a government position and if you started talking about things that they deemed you were not supposed to be talking about, it may not go your way. And no amount of whining and wailing and weeping and gnashing of teeth by other people, friends or otherwise, will stop it. Because now it will go to the Justice Department and they will look at it based on that criteria and they will make a judgment call. Are you worth the effort? Do they want to expend the political and the judicial capital to go ahead and put you away for doing it? Or is what you're saying insignificant to the overall big picture of what's going on in the world and what's going on in the Congress and what's going on in the administration today, and they will just let you keep talking? So that's kind of where that will probably go. And I don't know how severely he might be addressed, or if really the only severity is happening is a result of the press spinning it up and people looking for reasons to be offended about how he's being treated, because somehow they just don't care that he can't prove anything that he says. He's just saying it,
That's a really big problem. And you just mentioned sources. It seems like everyone in this community that seems to have top secret knowledge of special access programs, they never reveal their sources, Dave. They're like, oh, a high up CIA officer told me that they have bases on the moon and they got bases on Mars and they got all these directed energy weapons and they're hitting us, they're causing all this fire, and they never mention who told them that information.
Oh, they
that
won't.
Should be a red flag.
It is. It should be it's certainly a red flag for you and a red flag for me. If somebody is going to stand up and say, I know this, then my next question is, okay, I said that once upon a time too. And then I told everything about what I said I knew about. And I said, I'll take the consequences because I think it's important. So here we go. But when you stand up and you put out these things, it's attention-seeking behavior. It's throwing something out there because people are going to turn and look and listen to you, especially all of those who think that there's some cabal of conspiracy about UFOs and other things that they think they're going to crack open now. And there's this huge piece of the public that thinks that, no, not huge, but there's a portion of the public that has this idea that we have a right to know. Precisely where is that written? Tell me where in the entire history of this country, or any other country for that matter, that the masses had a right to know whatever they decided that they had a right to know. If these are indeed special access programs, which I believe they are, and they could fall into any number of categories. They could be new technology for which there are multiple patents out there. So if you want to go look for the patents, go look for them. There are patents for mass reduction, craft. There are patents, and these are patents that have been filed for by the U.S. Army or by the Space Force or by the Navy. And there are literally dozens of them out there. There are craft that they know that are going to be able to fly very soon at Mach 22, pulling over 200 Gs. There's this whole issue about hypersonic flight. Hypersonic flight has been an issue and been, since the day we broke the sound barrier and went into supersonic flight, from subsonic to supersonic. And after that, the sights were set on hypersonic. And hypersonic is, I think, Mach 8. So Mach 5. So we have a ways to go, but we've been working on that for 50 years. There are craft out there that when you finally do get an image of them, or you see a patent on them or something else, you start looking at that kind of a thing and go like, oh, well, that looks a lot like what people report seeing. They're balloons built by JP, what the heck is it? JP, it's not JPass. Yeah, JPass, JP Aerospace. That they
you got Bigelow Aerospace and you got Raytheon too.
Yeah, I don't know what Bigelow's working on. He's much more secretive than he's more secretive than others are. But JPass has been pretty open about some of the things that they've done. They won't say that, like the big flying V of lights over Phoenix that happened way back in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
But I heard an interview of the founder of JPass saying, that wasn't us, but I recognize the technology, and the technology is it's these massive balloons. JPass built one for Holloman Air Force Base that it's the size of a 747. It's 175 feet long and I think pushing 80 feet wide. And these are large, pointed, in a V shape like this, right? And then there's a bar that goes between them like that, and they fly like this. And you might ask the question, well, what are they used for? Well, they're ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance balloons that fly. They fly 100,000 feet up. It passed into the ionosphere. They're up there flying there because they can get really great speed. Why are they put that particular shape? It turns out that triangular shape like that is the most stable platform in subsonic, supersonic, and hypersonic flight. That's why that's the shape. And they have some of them that are 36 feet by 20 feet, and some of, like I said, 175 feet, and some of them even larger. And that's not even where it stops. We're already putting I'm going to tell you this, but then I'm going to tell you, I don't know all the particulars about it, but I do know very clearly that there is an intention with the development of the Space Force, that there is an intention to pre-position logistics in space. And by logistics, I mean tanks,
militarization of space. Yeah.
Well, the idea is this is a delivery issue. In combat, if we end up having to intervene with Russia and others, if Russia continues the path that I absolutely am very clear from a strategic perspective that Putin has on mind, and I've said this before, that Putin has stated it very clearly that his intention is to reform the international boundaries for the old Soviet Union. He said it before, and he said it deliberately and directly, and people with selective hearing don't listen. And he has taken Crimea. He is going to try to take the Ukraine. If he gets it, he will just keep expanding to the next one and the next one and the next one. Call it an invasion, call it a reclamation, call it an illegal redrawing of boundaries around sovereign nations, call it whatever you want to call it. It's aggression, pure and simple. And he's going to keep doing that. So the United States, as strategists, thinks about that. And the idea is when you go to war, think about how we finally got a footprint into Afghanistan. It has to start with planes, which is currently our fastest way to get troops, logistics, weapons, etc., into a country. And that takes weeks, days, weeks to actually build that up, to secure an airhead and build up an ample fighting force. The other option is ships. That absolutely takes weeks. That's weeks to get that there, which pile into months. So the idea is to pre-position weapons and munitions, food, water, etc., in space into giant orbital, logistics docks, if you will, and the ability to bring that stuff down to a place to do combat with, to actually form the force and to do combat. You can do it within, the claims are 30 minutes, which means it could be an hour and 30 minutes, or it could be 5 minutes, because if they're stating 30 minutes, that's just what they're willing to tell you. 30 minutes would be very fast. So they could be lying. It could be disinformation. They're not lying. They're lying to our real or perceived enemies, stating 30 minutes. Like I said, it could be 2 minutes, maybe, but it could also be 3 hours. Who knows? That part is the part you're never going to know until they do it. And that stuff is happening. SpaceX is involved in that. There's a brand new aircraft that the Air Force is building. It's not new, but I think it's the X-37B, right? Yeah, X-37B.
Looks exactly like a UFO.
It does. It looks exactly like a UFO that has been a picture taken by it was taken on an iPhone by the navigator or the weapons guy in the back from the sitting behind the pilot. And it was taken, and I've heard an interview of that guy, of that major colonel at this point, talking about taking that picture. And when you look at the picture, and then when you look at anything from a technical perspective of the imagery or even the drawings of the X-37B, it's the X-37B. It's what it is. So I'm not saying again that that maybe there are not alien technologies that are in and around us, or that we recovered. That could very well be, but the idea that some amongst us believe that you have a right to know about that's just preposterous. It's just preposterous. That's like you saying, first of all, consider what we're talking about here. We're talking about, if we find something like that, what do you think the Chinese or the Russians would do if they found something like that? What do you think the Germans would do? What do you think the North Koreans would do? Sorry, I didn't mean to lump Germany in with all of that, but they have been in 3 major conflicts. So it's just the aggressors in 3 major conflicts. So I'm just giving them credit for that. What do we think, might happen there? That it would just be openly shared as technology that they would want everybody else to know that they had? No, it's not. And if it is there, we're going to keep it, and we will keep it and try to figure out what we can do with it and what we can learn from it. And they're not going to share it. And it is not the right of the American people or anybody else to turn around and demand that be shared with them. It's preposterous. It's as ridiculous to think that, during the development of atomic weapons in the early 40s, in an effort to end the war, that somehow everybody felt they had a right to share that information. And of course, there were some scientists that wanted to do that very thing.
Yeah, and you were mentioning special access programs earlier, and I think it's important to clarify to the people that are listening what a special access program actually is, because you've been involved in several of them, and people in this community think that special access programs just revolve around reverse engineering of alien technology, when that is farthest thing from the case of what's going on. So could you explain to people what a special access program actually is?
Sure. First, everybody should understand that there are simple levels of intelligence classification, the highest of which is top secret. When something is top secret, it can have an additional identifier on there, like top secret lambda or top secret something else, right? Top secret. The something else is a code name that applies to a particular special access program. Okay, there are small exceptions to that, and then there are special access programs that exist within the military infrastructure. There are special access programs that exist within the national intelligence infrastructure. There are special access programs that exist within civilian contract organizations that work for and in behalf of the United States government. So Lockheed Martin might have a special access program that they are working a particular development of a particular type of technology. It could be a killer satellite. It could be an anti-sat missile flying at hypersonic speed. It could be, and you name it. It could be one of the craft that is going to be used to deliver logistics up to a stationary orbital station, logistics station. It could be all kinds of things, anything, any kinds of reconnaissance craft, any kinds of fighter craft, warships, etc. Whatever piece of technology that they might be working on, it could simply be an optics device, forward-looking infrared radar at the newer levels, or other things. And all these things are important because they want now to have forward sensing technology that doesn't register in enemy aircraft. They don't want it. When you turn radar on in your aircraft and it strikes another aircraft, potential enemy, that enemy knows that you have them in lock, that you have just seen them. So the idea there to manage stealth is to develop what they're calling passive systems, which means they can see very accurately where the enemy is and how they're moving and how fast they're moving and their direction of movement, their altitude, etc., and without the enemy ever knowing that they're there. Those systems are in existence already, but they just continue to perfect. Every time we build something and it gets leaked out or it gets seen or heard about, they do the same thing, or they try to defeat it, or they try to build a better system for discovering it, something else. So these special access programs that exist within the intel world, the weapons development world, they're DARPA, I mean, you name it, they're out there. They are very carefully controlled. They have a specific mission, investigative mission or development mission, testing mission, employment mission, whatever the case may be. And they are not things that are going to be shared. A top secret document is something that gets a lot of people in a lot of trouble if that gets leaked or gets left out when it's not supposed to be left out. A secret document, same thing, but lesser so. A confidential document or something else, still lesser. But if you release top secret information or even secret information pertaining to a special access program, that's when stuff really hits the fan, because that is how they control the kinds of information that allow us to continue to be the international powerhouse that we continue to be, so long as we can continue to do that and somebody doesn't step into the White House to make sure that that doesn't happen anymore, like cutting the defense budget. While you have two aggressors that are rapidly increasing and constantly testing the water to see whether or not the United States will get involved or the United States will react negatively to what is doing. Let me just stop about the SAP for a minute and go back to what's going on in Ukraine. If Russia prevails in the Ukraine because we don't act fast enough as a NATO ally to help them, what's going to happen is he's going to step squarely into another NATO country. And when he does that, then NATO is going to have to do something. Right now, I don't think Ukraine was actually a NATO ally. I misspoke, but there was interest in there and NATO interest was building up there. And if he keeps pushing it and keeps trying to rewrite or redefine these boundaries to reestablish the old Soviet Union, we're going to step into World War III. That's what's going to end up happening. And that is a big concern for everyone. So the way you deter that is through strength and a presence of saying, stop right there. Just go back, take care of your country like it was, and stop stepping out and trying to take over other sovereign nations to just add it back to yourself because that's where it was up until 1990 or 91. Stop it. The same thing is happening in China. And China and Russia have signed cooperation pacts where they are exchanging technology, selling technology back and forth to each other. And the greatest threat towards the United States right now, the greatest threat towards us, is espionage. Espionage of taking these technological secrets, taking these things that we know, that they don't know, or we think they don't know them, and protecting that so that they do not become aware of what it is that we're doing. So they try to keep us from being able to figure that out about them, which is why Intel, the Intel community exists. And we try to keep them from knowing that stuff. Special access programs, the kind that are dealing with any of this stuff, any of the legitimate stuff that we've been talking about in terms of surveillance and reconnaissance and storage and weaponry and anti-satellite weaponry, hyperspace, hypersonic unmanned vehicles, and hypersonic, eventually, hopefully, manned vehicles is where they're trying to go with that. Nobody's going to tell you that. And you have no right to know it. And guess what? Neither does the President of the United States.
Well, can special access programs also be used for psychological operations as well, or to subvert another country, or to take out another country, or something like that as well?
Well, it could be. I'm not. I'm aware of special access programs within DARPA that work on, large population control weaponry, and that's not new. That's been around they've been developing that since the 60s, and it got really heavy in the late 60s and in the 70s because there were concerns. There were concerns even in the 60s. They were concerns about global thermonuclear war, and what were we going to do as a nation to maintain a system of government and be able to contend with the dead, and be able to contend with the wounded, and contend with the displaced persons, which would really quickly start to fall apart. I mean, whether you know it or not, and I'm sure you do, anybody that pays attention to things that happen in natural disasters realize that it's literally within a matter of hours post the disaster that the entire infrastructure system begins to fall apart. Police disappear, fire, rescue disappear. Why? They have their own families to take care of, just like in Katrina, right? That's why it just fell into a state of lawlessness within 3 days. It was beyond lawlessness within 5 days. It was murder, it was robbery, looting, pilfering, all of these things. And so the government, our government, and any other government has a concern about that. They are very aware that things fall apart like that. And back in the 60s, when the idea was, how do we protect against thermonuclear war and the catastrophe to follow with that? How do we control population? Because there could be 500,000 people moving, trying to find shelter, water, food, right? And being willing to do whatever it takes to get it, because that's what would happen. There'd be these warlords that come together and have bands that follow them, and it would be complete and utter anarchy. And so the United States government is prepared for that. And so weapons get developed for that kind of stuff. Psychological operations are not necessarily the employment of particular kinds of weapons. Psychological operations are really like painting a picture, telling a story, maybe offering false hope and assurances, or maybe telling one group of people how bad it is in an effort to make them understand that they need to move to this other place. I mean, it can be a lot of different things. It can go to the very rudimentary, simplistic stuff of just playing loud music and other things to induce sleep deprivation and bright lights and strobes and crap like that, all the way up to infrasound weaponry and high-powered microwave weapons or microwave weaponry and other things to cause people to be nauseous and cause them to lose their equilibrium, or cause them to be more compliant. And does that sound like a horrific option? Yeah. But what would we do if we were in a thermonuclear engagement with Russia or China or North Korea, what would we do? Or Iran now, what would we do? I mean, if 5 million people were now just wandering the countryside, taking what they wanted, however they wanted it, in order to survive, which would be an understandable issue, but what would that be? So why would we do that? I mean, what would you do to prevent that?
Well, that's an interesting thing that you just bring up here is these electromagnetic frequency weapons. Because there's this whole community of people online that claim to be like targeted individuals, right? They claim that they're gang stalked by the government and three-letter organizations that are putting thoughts and voices and things into their head. Now, you're mentioning a different kind of frequency weapons. So, what do you know about these frequency weapons and how do they work?
Well, I do know that there is infrasound and microwave weaponry that can implant thoughts in your head. It doesn't implant it, but there's simple, even handheld infrasound type technology. It could be classified as a weapon, but it's really it's a passive kind of an engagement. But you can point this device at an individual and you can start talking, and based on a voice manipulator, you can make it whatever kind of a voice you wanted it to be. And that person would hear it. Different people describe it in different ways. Some people describe it as, I felt there was something right behind me whispering in my ear. Other people will say it was right inside my head, between my ears. I was hearing that voice. Other people will say it was right out here in front of me, like 2 feet away. So the technology exists and there are applications for it. I get it why they do it. I certainly hope that it's not being used nefariously or callously. Can I guarantee that that's not? No. I mean, I don't know what happens in those kinds of special access programs. If somebody develops something and they are testing it, what I logically and based on experience believe is that would be tested within that community and that special access program. And there may be a demonstration of that, but that demonstration would be on soldiers or sailors or airmen or Marines, in that kind of a setting. But we can't say that it doesn't sometimes get off the leash and somebody decides to go into a crowd or decides to target somebody and then just use it in that way. And that, if something like that were happening, it would be something that would probably be into a deeper intel community, like the agency. It would go into the CIA, maybe the FBI. I think both of those are capable of doing something like that.
Now, what would be the purpose of doing that on the public, though? That's my whole qualm with these, with the targeted individuals. None of them that claim that they're targeted individuals has an explanation as to why they would be targeted. Like, I've
I
brought this up
agree.
to several of them, and I'm like,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
if this is actually really happening to you, why do you think that it's happening to you?
Well, not just to let me play the devil's advocate on that thought, because it's a good thought and I understand it and I tend to agree with it. But if we go back to MK Ultra, to all the various special access programs that were under MK Ultra, we know that in some cases they were targeting for the experimentation just innocent civilians that they had, decided they were of a social status or they were of a community that they could do that to and get away with it just to see, how it would work.
Uncredible people.
Right.
Yeah.
So it could happen. I don't at all think that it would ever be sanctioned when something like that does happen. In my opinion and experience, it's always been somebody in one of these special access programs who just gets off the chain and goes and does it just for the sake of seeing what it can do. And that sounds ridiculous that something like that can happen, but the world is made up of all different kinds of people. And just because that person happens to be working in a special access program dealing with that kind of weaponry, whether that person thinks that weapon is passive or active, or whether it can cause harm, or whether they're just screwing with somebody and they want to see what it'll do, that can happen. If it's ever found out, I'm certain that it would be dealt with accordingly, because I know that that's not, at least in the 3 special access programs I was in, while everybody was very closely guarding what they were working on, there were not men or women in those special access programs I was in that were nefarious and evil, that would do something to just go screw with somebody's life or sense of well-being. So I think that a lot of people are sensitive to what's just going on in our environment. I mean, if you understand the amount of microwave leakage that's around, the number of things that are moving in and through you, the number of radio waves, the microwaves, and all other manner of things, both man-made and naturally occurring, I think that there are some people who could be just genetically susceptible to it. Some people may accuse me of that, making that a reach. I'm not making it a reach. We know that it is that way. Some people start to get these headaches. It's like you may not be allergic to something for an entire lifetime, and then by the time you're 68, suddenly you're allergic to a cat, or you're allergic to peanuts. I mean, or you may not ever be susceptible to microwave energy, but just because of X number of years of existing in an environment where we're bombarded with it, and we are bombarded with it. It's constant in our lives. And do we know what the long-term effect of it would be? No, we don't, but we are constantly bombarded with it. Bluetooth, cell phones, radio transmissions, everything you can possibly think of is here. We're in that electrostatic field, as Itzhak Bentov posited, right? It's a real thing. We're there. So who knows whether or not that's one of the things that triggers this in people.
I think that it's drugs. I think that drugs is what triggers it and opens a back door in people's minds.
You mean
right?
Just
Like
standard issue pharmaceuticals, or
pharmaceutical drugs, illicit drugs, any of those kinds of drugs? Because as you know, I've read through all of the MK Ultra programs, all the sub projects, and I've mentioned this several times, and I've talked to you about it several times as well. But antidepressants came out of the MK Ultra programs. Antipsychotics came out of the MK Ultra programs. Amphetamines came out of the MK Ultra programs. Adderall and Ritalin, right? And when you look up the statistics of how many people just in the United States are on some form of pharmaceutical drug, over half the population, and from a study from 2014 to 2016, half the population, including kids and adults, were on some form of pharmaceutical medication. Now, in that period of time from 2016 up till 2023, I guarantee it's done nothing but go up. It's not going down. It's definitely going up, right? So I think that that's a trick in a way that they've backdoored a lot of these frequency technologies, and people thinking that they're getting hit with voice of skull technology, or the voice of God technology, as some people created. It's opening up a passageway in their brain for them to access this more easily, right? Because I've never had it happen to me ever, because I don't take any drugs, right? Never heard any voices in my head or anything. But majority of the people that are targeted in that way, again, it's like what you were mentioning earlier with the MK Ultra programs. They started on low income housing neighborhoods. They started in prisons. There was whole hospital wings that were opened for just to study MK Ultra, MK Ultra experimentation, right? So it makes sense that they would also use this experimentation on people that are, one, is uncredible, two, that are on some sort of pharmaceutical drug, whether that be Adderall, Ritalin, some kind of antidepressant, antipsychotic, or some sort of illicit drug like methamphetamine, right? Which makes you go out,
or just just by virtue of that now becomes just an environmental factor or variable that they are participating in. It also means that with all of these, electronics and the frequencies and all the other, makes them more susceptible. It does open channels for that to affect them in that way. But every person that has ever said that to me, and I've been confronted with that from people, in the last 35 years, and my response I want to make sure that I'm not being unkind, but I have to say, why would they target you? I mean, what do you know? I mean, you work in a shoe store or you do why would they target you?
Exactly.
What makes you think that you got singled out of all the people who live in Manhattan, that you got singled out for an infrasound weapon to affect you? I'm not saying that, the things that go on in Manhattan, the amount of microwave energy that gets bounced around there. I mean, back when the World Trade Center existed, there was a coating placed on one side of one of the buildings because there were microwave towers from other high rises that were in that vicinity that were actually shooting through those windows. And people people working in there used to start complaining of vertigo, nausea, the ears ringing, headaches, those kinds of things. And so they did a measurement and found that the microwave readings coming off cell towers and all the other stuff were extraordinarily high. And so they had to put a reflective coating on there to bounce that stuff off and drop it down to what they considered, a more appropriate level of microwave energy in there. I know that I sat down with a guy who worked at Empire State Building. He was a maintenance guy that, did maintenance engineer that worked on things. And he gave me this whole story in a little diner in Carteret, New Jersey one night. He said, yeah, this whole microwave thing he goes, it's crazy. Now that it's up there and out there, he goes, when we get up there and start changing light bulbs, like when we go into the Christmas lights up on the top of the Empire State Building, he said, we time it so that we are not there during the measured peak values of microwave energy up there. He said, but sometimes we get caught when certain things happen around the city and the microwave energy peaks because of the transmissions back and forth of different things. So they, in those days, carried flash bulbs. Remember, we used to put those flash bulbs on your Polaroid camera or something like that, that was your flash. They would carry those, the stacks of like 6 of them in a thing you'd plug into the camera, and they would put those in their pocket. And when those things started to pop, they knew that the microwave energy was peaking up on the top of the Empire State Building, and they would get off the roof. They would stop work until, at a different time, they could go back up there and finish their tasks. So it's very real that it's there. And in places like Manhattan, there are extraordinarily high concentrations of that. And if you're susceptible to or sensitive to, and maybe just have been there long enough for it to truly reach a cumulative level of effect in you. That's why I never wanted to live there.
What's that disease that, well, it's not a disease, but it's a symptom, Havana syndrome, that a lot of these agents and people that work for the military and
the Cubans were doing that. It's absolutely what they were doing. They were using, I've heard infrasound and microwave. They may have been using both, who knows, but it sounds more like microwave. And I have heard an interview of an individual who actually was worked in that embassy, who was hit by this microwave, and to this day is not well from it. I mean, it did enough damage to him and others, that enough neurological damage that it's actually visible in PET scans and in other imagery. It neurologically damaged their brain and their eyes and their ears. And so yeah, there's nothing that will make it right except maybe time. But everyone that's, you know, seen him from the physician perspectives have all said that, yeah, we don't know what to do for you. So I'm sure he's probably on 100% disability and retired, maybe. But yeah, it can be damaging.
Well, I
To
think the
some people,
problem with that
not.
is actually proving that it came from some sort of microwave EMF radiation, because I'm pretty sure that the CIA or three-letter organizations did a huge investigation into this, and there's a huge article that was written about it,
Yeah.
and they basically said that they don't know where it came from. Right? I mean, that's them just saying that they don't know how it happened, how these people got this disorder or this illness or whatever. So it's
I'm aware.
possible that it comes from these electromagnetic frequencies, but I think that the problem is proving that it came from those.
Yeah, and there's the other thing too. You have to understand, you know, we've got a little embassy there sitting in Havana, Cuba, and we want to keep that embassy there because one of the biggest, we got to keep an eye on things there. Because why? Because Cuba is right now one of the biggest collectors of espionage on the United States. And they're collecting espionage on the United States, and they're getting really good at it. And they sell it to China, to Russia, North Korea. They sell it to whomever wants it. And there was a female analyst. It was actually, she was the South American station chief who was working in the Defense Intelligence Agency. I can't remember her name now, but she was a Cuban national, and she was working in the Defense Intelligence Agency. Was by all reviews a stellar analyst and chief of the desk for Central and South America, and ended up being a Cuban spy in the midst of the DIA, and was there for 15 or 18 years. And she was caught and convicted and still serving a prison sentence, I think, until, I don't know if she'll ever get out. But that kind of stuff is going on there. So you have to think about what the government and the agency would do if they thought that had actually happened. Would they blame Cuba and then possibly cause something to happen where they get expelled from Cuba for pointing the finger in that way? Because remember, we're there, and we have to, we're there, and it's our territory theoretically, as that works out. But it's not beyond the Cubans to turn around and say, "Get out of our country."
Yeah, this is an article. I don't see when it was posted, but it says that the CIA says the Havana syndrome not a result of sustained campaign by hostile power. In about 24 cases, however, the agency can't rule out foreign involvement, just like you were mentioning, including many of the cases that originated in the U.S. Embassy of Havana beginning in 2016. In a new intelligence assignment, the CIA has ruled out that the mysterious symptoms known as Havana syndrome are the result of a sustained global campaign by hostile power aimed at hundreds of U.S. diplomats and spies. Six people briefed on the matter told NBC News. Right, in about 24 cases, the agency cannot rule out foreign involvement, including many of the cases that originated in the U.S. Embassy of Havana beginning in 2016. Another group of cases are considered unresolved, but the hundreds of other cases of possible symptoms, the agency has found plausible alternative explanations, sources have said. So, hey, it's definitely interesting
that kind of weaponry exists. Okay, it exists. I mean, I know that it exists. It's existed since it was first being developed. As I said, it was first being looked at for as variants. Every time you have some piece of technology that serves a purpose, like for microwave relays or communications, whatever the case may be, there's always a study of that variant to be used as a weapon in some cases. if it can be. They're always looking for that. Can it be used for propulsion? Can it be used for in other ways other than, voice communications and those things? Can it be used for something else? So there's always some other aspect of something looking at it. And I know that it was also one of the original weapons that were going to be considered for the Star Wars, the initiative, when Reagan made that announcement. High-powered microwave weapons were very real, but they were very big, and the power generation requirements for them were enormous, which is why they didn't get. It took a long time before that kind of technology could even be thought of to be put up into space. But it is that at that place now they can do that. But there are other things that they think might even be better than infrasound or microwave or lasers. There are other kinds of things. There are newer weapons, there are particle beam weapons. All of those things are out there and being worked on and being looked at. Because why? Because we live in a dangerous world, and doing it makes it more dangerous, but nobody's come up with a way yet where everybody is just going to turn around and say, you know what? We're not going to be the aggressor. We're not going to do that. And even when they do say that, they continue to work on those things, and then they invade another country. And so we are really blessed that that's not happened here, except by the British. So other than that, we have been blessed, and that's not happened here. But there are very good reasons why that hasn't happened here, and we want to make sure that continues to be. I personally like making sure that I don't see landing craft coming across the shore somewhere, right?
So what do you think? We're on this electromagnetic frequency talk right now. Do you think that they have what people in the community call directed energy weapons? Do you think
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's coming from space, the militarization of space?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Space Force is primarily designed. That's certainly one aspect of it. I mean, the very first time we shot down a Soviet satellite was in the 60s, I'm pretty sure. And you double check me on just the date. It was an F-15 aircraft, and the guy that shot it down is now a major general, retired from the Air Force. And they had a specially designed anti-sat missile that was under his F-15. He flew to 35,000 feet. I think this was in 69, 35,000 feet. And he was given the coordinates, the actual trigonometry for them to figure out, in the physics to figure out when he was to release the missile. Is probably still classified to this day, but all of that was calculated, and he had a modified display. And when he got to that point, he had permission to release the missile. He released the missile. It comes off the rails, and it climbs from the 35,000 feet, and it climbs straight up into orbit, where it meets that missile. The satellite coming to it, a Soviet satellite, and it takes it out. So that was the first time we shot down a Soviet satellite. And anti-sat technology has been moving along since before that. Certainly that was an application of it, and it has been continuing on. It's the Strategic Defense Initiative was one of the things that they felt was, a huge contributing factor to the fall of the Soviet Union, because they just simply couldn't keep up with it. They didn't have the money or the resources to expend on it anymore. They basically quit their rocket program, and they just couldn't keep up with that and everything else, because it's kind of a failed proposition, that communism in that way. It just doesn't work. Nobody wants to buy your lot of cars, and nobody cares about your clocks either, so you didn't export anything but sugar to Cuba. And so, yeah, it just didn't work. There's no merit-based application of anything there, just all based on threats. So
that seems to be the whole narrative here is a threat narrative, and that seems to be the whole UFO government disclosure narrative as well. Is a threat from space, that they're invading our airspace, that they're
who the aliens are, or
I guess the aliens are invading our airspace and are here to take us out and wipe us off the planet. Dave, you didn't know?
I don't pay attention to stuff like that, because I mean, I figure if something's an interstellar, has an interstellar, flight capability, and it comes in, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. All I could say is that that's why special access programs exist. And that's why our government works on those kinds of things and focuses on those kinds of technologies and capabilities. And if there were, I'm always confused by the UFO community to a certain extent. I mean, I think I understand what they're after, but then there are all these factions. There's one faction of it that thinks that alien races are going to save humanity from itself. There's another that thinks that, okay, now they're going to come in and kill us all, like War of the Worlds kind of stuff. Or there's another faction of it that is, we have a right to know everything the government knows about alien technology. And if there is any, or if there's little gray men in freezers somewhere, we have a right to know, because we have a right to know. And my point is, on the right to know, you don't have a right to know. It's not, that's like saying you have a right to know everything the CIA is doing. That's never going to happen. To think about something like that, or to throw that out, that's so Pollyannish and immature, to think that your sense of entitlement allows you to just slam your fist on the table and say, tell me everything you're doing. That's not going to happen. And no, it's not your right. Secondly, the whole idea that they may be, amassing the Space Force is up there to defend against an alien invasion. I can assure you, just having been a former military guy in special ops community, that people think about that. I assure you they do. Hey, if the military has an operations plan for zombie apocalypse, I'm sure they have an operations plan somewhere on the shelf that they review constantly, dust it off, and update it with, offensive measures, defensive measures, in the event something like that were ever to happen. I'm sure they've thought about it. But do I think that that's what we're seeing in and around the skies around us? How the hell would I know? I mean, how would you know? How would anybody know? So is the objective now to, increase high anxiety with high strangeness and run around and, worry about whether something like that's going to happen? I think that's one of those kinds of things that you have to trust, that with a strong nation and a strong defensive force and a strong intel force, and that you're going to be protected as well as you can be protected. If you thought that the idea is that you should be able to twist the arm of the government to turn around and say to you, yeah, we think that we might get attacked someday, like, what do you think that would do for the population? Like, have them do what? Go build alien shelters or something like that and stock up on MREs? I mean, what, you see what I mean? I'm not trying to be ludicrous or insulting about it. I'm trying to say,
sounds like Y2K all over again.
Yeah. What do you really think you're going to do if that was the case? An interstellar traveler like pops through a portal, with an entire fleet of, battle ships, and, and starts taking us out on the surface of the planet. Well, what did you think it was going to do if the president or somebody turns around and, the CIA, and goes like, yeah, we're going to give a briefing to everybody on the planet now. It's looking bad. We think there may be an alien invasion. I'm making light of it. I'm just trying to say, what did you really think was going to happen from that? And then for the others who think that it's just their right to be told by the government that the government is aware of alien technologies or alien craft, they won't do that. They're not going to do it. And the reason they won't do it is because it's a special access program. And as a special access program, they're not going to tell you that because here's the reason. If they tell you that, it won't stop there. Then that'll be the next pressure will be to show us pictures
disclose
of
more and more,
disclose
and
more,
more,
disclose
more
more,
questions
disclose more.
asked.
That's right. And that's the reason special access programs exist. That's the reason in a special access program, there could be 100 people, oftentimes more. There could be far less. In this last special access program I was in, there were 43 of us in the entire unit, and there were only about 32 of us, if that many, that actually had special access programs. And we were specifically forbidden to tell anybody in that unit what our special access project was. And that's how special access programs stay secret for as long as they stay secret, because people don't sit down at the lunchroom table and go, hey, guess what I'm working on? Or, hey, you want to do this? Or what are you doing today, Todd? You know, that's not what happens. They keep it closed down and they guard them very carefully. The people that take those things over are handpicked to set in that seat when one person leaves. They're not typically, I was in military special access programs, one agency program, but the ones that are in DARPA and the ones that are in the agency or the DIA or the NSA or any of those other things, and any of the civilian contract agencies, they're not headed up by military personnel. And why? Because military personnel are transient. You're only in a duty station for a certain amount of time and then you're out. And then they have to bring another person in. And the way they look at that is that's a risk now to the secrecy of the program, because we don't want transient people in here. We want people who are going to be here for almost their entire career until they retire and come out. And
so even the people that are in the high up positions don't even really know what's going on because they're switched out so often.
You're right. They don't know, and they don't want to know. They don't want to know. It's kind of the unwritten agreement, the stated agreement, but the unwritten agreement is that when you brief your special access program to somebody that's asked you to brief it, you brief precisely what you want them to know. And you do not brief them on the things that you don't want them to know. And those are the rules. And I know people are thinking like, my God, how can we operate like that? We operate like that because you're trying to keep it secret. You're trying not to have it show up on the pages of the Washington Post, or to have some guy step up to get some airtime and pretend that he's a whistleblower and throw it out there because he heard it or saw it on a document or something else. That's why they don't do that. And so when the president comes in and gets sworn in, again, in those special access programs, that individual is considered a transient member of, transient, moving through the White House 4 years, maybe if they're lucky, 8 years. But after that, they're gone. And we are not going to tell them everything that is going on in this special access program. They won't. And there is no precedent in law or under the Constitution that empowers a president to force the intelligence community or these other special access programs to have to tell them everything that they ask for by law. There is no provision for that. Some constitutional legal experts may dispute that and try to find certain wording that does provide for that. But there's a reason that the president picks who's, head of the Justice Department. There's a reason why the FBI director is picked. There's a reason why the CIA director is picked and appointed. There's a reason for that. It's so that you understand that that stuff is by your design, but they are under no obligation to tell you these things. And most presidents would not want to know. They always tell you in the talk shows, like the last one I remember
in the debates,
yeah, Obama sitting there in some talk show telling everybody, the question was asked by whomever it was, I don't remember who the interviewer was, but said, were you going to find out about the UFOs and the aliens and all that stuff? And, he laughed, Obama did, and then said, of course I will, So I remember Bill Clinton doing the same thing.
And Hillary.
And then Hillary, of course I'll tell you all.
That's whenever she coined the term UAP, and she was the first person that turned UFO into UAP.
I wasn't aware of that.
Well, publicly, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure it was classified as UAP within the military and through other organizations. They were classifying it as UAP, but I think it was on Jimmy Fallon or one of those shows that she was on, and she was asked if she would reveal, if she became president, if she would reveal the alien technologies and what UFOs really were, and then she was like, ha 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 ha, that's funny, we don't call them UFOs anymore, we call them UAPs.
And has there ever been a president who, after being in office, has turned around and said, here is my executive memorandum that is explaining to the people of America and the world, where we are with UFO technology, et cetera, et cetera. Has that ever happened? No.
Nope.
And it never will, because they're not given that briefing. And even if the president turned around and said, no, you're not giving me what I want, I can just see it. There'd be some like executive level civilian that's, been in that position for 2 decades, and the president's going, no, I know there's more. You have to tell me everything. And that guy would turn right around and say, yes, Mr. President, here's the briefing that I just gave you. No, I'm gonna get the Justice Department. We're gonna haul you off, dragging your toes on the sidewalk, and throw you in a jail until you tell us. Yes, Mr. President, here is the briefing that I was going to give you. That's what would happen.
Now, I do think that it's highly possible that the UFO scenario and the UFO hypothesis is going to be something that's going to be talked about in the 2024 presidential debates, and how they handle that is going to be interesting in what they say. And whoever has the nomination, it really doesn't matter to me. I think it's all nonsense, but whoever has the nominations of both parties, I think are going to have to answer some kind of questions about the UAP, UFO topic and the extraterrestrial topic, because it's so huge right now. Too big.
Yeah, well, they're politicians. They'll have an answer.
Yeah.
They'll have a meaningless answer that will feed into people that are looking for meaningless answers to be meaningful. And that's what they do. They'll have a meaningless answer. They'll make all sorts of neat little promises. And then what will end up happening is nothing. Just like nothing is going to come out of all of this fervor that's going on right now. It's not going to happen. They're not going to turn around and say to you, here's all the truth. Sorry, we've been keeping this, hidden from all of you, but here it is.
And here's another question, Dave, is why aren't more people upset about this? Why aren't more people pissed off about this, right? They're finally coming out and saying that extraterrestrials are finally real and that UFOs are finally real, but they've been supposedly covering it up since Roswell, right?
They haven't said that extraterrestrials are real, have they? No, they haven't said that. They've said that
Crush is basically saying that UFO people have bodies have come down in this crash. Right.
That guy. Yeah. Now,
right. It's not the government saying it, but in that congressional hearing, people are taking it as that it's finally the government saying that extraterrestrials exist, but they have said that UFOs are real. That
there
UAPs are real.
All sorts of aerial phenomenon that look. Let me just connect the dots again on this. Okay. It's like I don't even know if you can see this. Okay. Does that show up there? Can you read what that patent is about?
I can't read it. It's too small.
Okay. It's a patent, and there are patents. I want you to look at the craft.
Okay? Oh, the TR3B. Yeah.
Okay. Now, these patents are out there. You can start looking for them. This is Salvatore Pais, P-A-I-S. And you should look up his stuff. This happens to be a patent that was filed by the Navy. That is a craft using an internal mass reduction device. There are all sorts of things that when pilots see them, These craft defy what we consider to be normal aeronautical craft. You interview an airline pilot or even a fighter pilot and say, how can something like that be doing that? And they will say to you, it can't. It has no flight control surfaces. It has no visible means of propulsion. And so therefore, it is not the technology of humankind. That's a bold statement for a fighter pilot to make, because that fighter pilot doesn't work in those special access programs that might be working on something like that and about 150 other such patents.
It's exactly like what you were saying. They don't have the need to know. They don't
That's
have
right.
the need to know
It's
about
not
any of those
part of
other
their
programs.
training. It's not part of their threat. They don't train to fight it. They aren't brought in and briefed on it. They're a fighter pilot. That's a very intelligent, highly trained individual, but they're a fighter pilot. They're not read into special access programs. They don't know anything about those special access programs. They don't know anything about the X-37B. They don't know anything about, what are they calling the black mantis or white mantis or white bat, they don't know anything about those things. They don't know about those ISR balloons. They don't know anything about what Space Force is operating on. They don't know about anti-sat satellites. They don't know about anti-sat craft. They don't know anything about, anti-sat hypersonic weaponry. They don't know anything about directed energy weaponry, or they don't know anything unless somebody says, we're going to put this on your airplane and you're going to use this to take down other enemy fighter aircraft, or they specifically train them to do something different. There are some interesting things going on here. For us, there's a whole new organization that actually went away at the end of the Cold War that is now back. And they're fighter pilots that actually now test aircraft and other weaponry and systems that are going on aircraft. And it's a really unusual thing to see. They're called the Red Wings or Red Wings. And then there's a Red Wings and an avionics red cell, something like that. You can look them up. There have been photographs taken of them with their patches on, and in flying aircraft that have experimental weaponry or experimental sensors and other things on them. So that is a development that is there as well. And of course, what they're doing just is an application at a tactical level. And then the stuff that's going on with the Space Force is, it's just going to get, I'm sure that as some of the projects that are black go to gray, when projects go to gray, that's when they'll actually start saying, this is a technology that we've developed. They're not going to tell you what it can do or what it can't do, its strengths and weaknesses, but they'll actually disclose it when that black project becomes a gray project, because you're going to start seeing it on airplanes and people or something else. So you may see the X-37B flying, or you might see some of these others like the Cormorant. That's another really interesting aircraft that people have not even thought about. It's a submarine launched ISR aircraft. It comes up out of the submarine missile tube. It opens up its wings underwater, which look like a cormorant's wings. You have a body that looks like a tic tac, but it's got a stabilizer all the way from nose to tail to the back of it. And it has these wings that are folded in behind it, crumped up and folded like this, I guess. And it comes up out of the missile tube and it opens up the wings. It's propelled up out of the water. It has 2 rocket engines then. And there are other engines that are being worked on, scramjet and other kinds of things. And it pushes it up into a classified altitude. And it's submarine launched, which gives us tremendous advantage, because if you launch it from a submarine, nobody can ever know where it really came from. They can only know it came from where the submarine was, but not where the submarine is going to be. And this craft has the ability to fly up again at extraordinarily high altitude, and then it comes down silently. And as it comes down silently, it's photographing or collecting electronic intelligence or signal intelligence. And when it's ready, it's recalled back to the submarine when it's done. And it comes back to the submarine. It can, there are parachute lowering of it, but there is also a version of it that can fold its wings and dive right into the water like a cormorant, which is why they call it that. Right?
Basically saying that a lot of what people are thinking are extraterrestrial craft are advanced military craft.
I'm not
Like I've
saying
been
there aren't
mentioning
alien
this
craft.
entire time. Confirmed, Dave. It's all craft. Like I knew it. I knew it was.
It may not be. I mean, there may be, there could be an alien space base down, down there next to the Titanic that nobody's just seen. But there are also, logical, tactical, strategic, things that are being developed and have been developed and we're never going to stop being developed. And the comforting thing I think people should take from just kind of what we're talking about with this is that so far, the belief is that we're kind of leading the race as a nation on this kind of stuff and the development of these technologies. But could the Russians be doing the same thing? Yeah. Could the Chinese be doing it? Absolutely. Both have sufficient funds, more or less, to make that happen. Not as much as we have, but they have funding to make that happen. And, hypersonic travel and, Space Force and space weaponry, that's all something that they're after just as much as we are. We're just trying to get there first with the most to be capable of protecting us from any other kind of aggression or opposition. That's what's trying to happen. We're not trying to invade China or Russia.
We got a pretty good question here. You already kind of went over it, that the gray projects kind of get disclosed more to the public, but they don't tell you what exactly they are. But Welcome to the Show wants to know if you have any examples of gray projects that you would know about.
Yeah. I mean, I was telling you about, here's a great project. It's called the EM drive. And a good place to look for these things, those that are really interested in just keeping up with a lot of this stuff that is probably being called alien technology, is Popular Mechanics, any of the aviation science magazines. I want to say Aviation Weekly, but that's probably not the best one. But any of those kinds of things, Scientific American, all of that's high school level, portrayals of scientific development. So you don't have to be a physicist or an aeronautical engineer or something like that to understand what they're talking about. You can just get a good sense for that. And it'll start naming inventors and other things. And you can go from there and you can go to the US Patent Office and you can start looking for patents like the one I just showed you there. And the day I pulled that one down, I pulled down like 8 others, all of them pertaining to the kinds of things that we've been talking about tonight that could very easily be talked about in terms of a UAP or UFO or an alien technology. You have a craft that has the ability to reduce its mass in flight. The reason that is being developed is so you have a craft that has a capability to fly at hypersonic speed and also can then be a hybrid where it can not only fly in atmosphere and outer atmosphere, suborbital flight or orbital flight, but it can also go into water. So those things are being looked at and worked on. And you may see, an experimental of that happening. And of course, the other flip side of that coin is it might be an alien craft. I don't know, but my vote is up first of all to say it's something we're working on and building.
Right.
And you can't trust folks that are not involved in that special access program to discount that technology as not man-made. It's not man-made as far as they know. And that would be a better answer for them to say. I don't know how it could fly with no wings, no stabilizers, no flight surfaces, no obvious, propulsion mechanism. But there are people working on electromagnetic motors. There are multiples of them, but one patent I looked at is called the M motor, EM motor, and it uses microwave energy as a propulsion device. And if you want to know what that looks like, what are those? Used to have them like a little. Last time I saw was in high school. It was a glass vacuum, and it had a perfectly balanced rotating, metal fan on the inside of it, and you can shine a light on it. You could put a light next to it, and the photons of light go through the glass, through the vacuum, and they hit the blade, and it spins very quickly. The whole idea for that is also what's applicable in what are called solar sails, in using solar sails to propel. So you can drive away from the sun, because the photons, the energy, the waveform energy coming from the sun pushes on the solar sails and pushes the craft through space, through the vacuum of space. So in the M motor, it was developed by a British scientist who I can't remember his name, but they had results with it. And then another independent laboratory, I think, attempted to replicate the results and couldn't get it to be a propulsion drive. But it was being developed in secret in the UK. And it was then going from a black project into a gray project. And now there's lots of stuff that you can see published on the M motor, EM motor, or EM propulsion. And it's out there. You can read about it, but they're not stopping the work on it. They're going to continue. So it's an actual piece of hardware that at this point they're willing to talk about, because the inventor himself is getting very old, and he wanted it not to just be developed as, as military propulsion. He wanted it to be used as other things. So that's an example of a gray technology now that is out. And if you develop that, if they perfect it, which they will at some point, they will harness, microwave energy to be used as a propulsion drive of some kind. And when they get around to being capable of doing that, and they're not just, floating vehicles on a frozen racetrack, superconductors, but that's a start as well. But all of these other pulse drives, warp drives, all those terms that you hear coming from, people talking about alien technologies and other things, that's all being worked on. We're doing all of that.
But did it come from extraterrestrials? We don't know, and I don't think so. I don't think that it did. I think it's something we just developed and we tapped into.
If it came from extraterrestrials and we had an actual example of it, I don't think we'd be fudging around with superconductors and frozen racetracks to send, metal discs around on it. We would actually have, over the last 50 years, figured it out. And there's another thing. It's just like this language that comes around all the time. You'll hear people, and it gets thrown out as part of something that you've always been savvy to, Ryder, which is it's kind of disinformation to cause people to scurry over here or scurry over there. There's an interview several years ago by a guy that was head of this original UFO investigative agency, and who made the comment to the interviewer saying that we have a collection of unique alloys with unique arrays of isotopes, which are not of this world. Now, what does that say to people who are completely bought into the whole UFO story? Yep. It is, he just admitted that they have unique alloys and that they have, they have other materials that carry isotope properties not found on planet Earth. The whole science behind this is called meteoretics. What that is, it means that, they can find alloys that come as meteors that are not something you can make. We don't know how to make something, an alloy like that alloy that came into a meteor. It doesn't mean that the meteor came from another civilization. or fell off of some passing spacecraft. They're just meteors that don't burn up in the atmosphere, hit the Earth, and then they pick them up and go, wow, we can't do this. It's a unique combination of one I've heard about is like of a nickel and iron that has formed a unique, extraordinarily hard alloy that we don't know how to make. We have no idea how to make this. And other things about isotopes that are things that fall to the planet that have unique isotope configurations on them that don't fit anything that we know about here. Again, that's meteorics. It's always hard for me to say. Meteorics. That's a study of that. The people that work within that particular field of science, what they do is they look at those things and they can, the configuration of the isotopes and these alloys, it's like they use it as an indicator, a fingerprint, if you will, a genetic imprint of where that came from within the galaxy or within the solar system. And that's the study of that. So this guy turning around and making that statement in that way without qualifying it could have been used just to send people off like spinning tops in various directions, where he could have turned around and said it just as I said it, which it doesn't mean that we're positing that this came from an alien civilization or craft. We're just saying we don't know how to make this. And these things over here are not anything you find on planet Earth. But it doesn't mean that they're alien. It means that they're from the universe, from the galaxy, from our solar system. Which, why
it's
wouldn't
mental gymnastics with words, trying to deceive people into thinking something actually happened when it didn't happen. Right? I mean, and then that gets regurgitated throughout the community, and then it turns into something that it was never meant to be in the first place. Like, I've been studying all these UFO cults, Dave, and I don't know if you've had the time or even wanted to research into these UFO cults, but it's amazing.
I stopped after 9/11 when I had my last, I stood on a stage in Las Vegas, and I had prepared remarks, and I got up, and you can probably figure out which one it is. And I got up there and I just said, I really don't feel like talking about the stuff you want me to talk about. It was like 2 weeks after 9/11, somewhere in that neighborhood. And I said, I would like to just take questions. Just ask me what you want to ask me and I'll talk about it. And that was where I got into this point of saying, because people were like, well, what should you do? What should we do? They immediately stopped talking about UFOs and wanted to talk about what I, as a soldier, special operations infantry officer, what I thought we should be doing in that. And I cautioned them very dearly. I said, I see all of you flying your flags on your cars, and I get it. I understand what you want to do. And I understand that. I understand the desire to do that. But I'm going to tell you this. We have the technology to be able to extract a price for what was done without putting soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines boots on the ground over there, because this is an insurgency and it will be a long and protracted war. Of course, God, when I said that, I had no idea it would be 20 years long. But I said, 5 years from now, when kind of the sting of what just happened has worn off, even though you will never forget, but you'll not be as angry then as you are now. And we will have amassed a tremendous amount of debt. And the human toll is the fact that there will be young men and women 5 years from now that'll still be dying in the dirt of this foreign land if we do this. And I said, in 10 years from now, referencing the Vietnam War, some of you in this room will be dead, but others of you will have long forgotten after 10 years the anger and the angst that you sense right now. But there will still be young American men and women dying in the dirt of that faraway place. Understand that when you commit, or want your president to commit to sending troops on the ground. Not like any of them could have stopped it, but I wanted them to just be aware of that cost. And there were people in the audience that were booing me. because I said that. Because
they're America. Yeah, America takes over everyone and does what they want, right?
But there's always a cost for doing that, you know? There's
Thanks so much,
always
Anonymous, for the $5
Yeah.
super chat. Thanks for your kind and generosity and support of the show. Appreciate you a lot, brother. Yeah, we're going to wrap up here in around 10 minutes. I want to cover a little bit of Dave's remote viewing that he's done on some TV shows. He was a part of a couple of TV shows, and I'm not sure here recently how much you can actually talk about it. I think one of them aired, but if you have any questions, I can get a few questions here in the last couple of minutes. So, Dave, tell us about these. I don't mean to switch topics on you. It's just getting kind of long here. We've been on for about an hour and a half. Talk to us about the work that you've done on these TV shows and what that entailed and exactly what happened there.
Yeah, one of them, you're under a strict NDA that until the shows air, you're not supposed to talk about them. But I did do, not remote viewing, but I did do a program for the Unexplained for History Channel. Now, more on that when it airs. I understand it's just gone into editing now, and it's not really me talking about remote viewing. But for the History Channel Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, which is this new variant that they have, what I found out is, and I should have understood, because going into it, I knew that this was not going to be a show about remote viewing. This was going to be a show about Beyond Skinwalker Ranch doing essentially the same things that they do at Skinwalker Ranch, only you're going to be doing it at other, hot spots. And I was just going to be able to apply remote viewing as another experiment to find things. I couched this with Travis and with Eric and with the two new hosts of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And of course, then you had like a whole series of producers and directors, all of them. And I went through all of the the process, the procedures to do this. We pulled together 70 remote viewers from 7 different countries. And that produced on 3 separate targets. Pardon me. Literally, it had the potential to produce somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10,000 pages of data, which would have been, in terms of verbal and visual sensory data, it could have been somewhere between 10 to 15,000 with that. It was basically 2.5 weeks of work, just working with the viewers and doing Zoom calls to send the taskings and then have them do their work and then bring it back. And then we had to sit down from an analytical perspective and comb through data and harvest data. And we didn't, we weren't going to be able to turn around and reshape focus on things, but we did 3 separate targets and pulled all of this data together. When Travis saw the data, I was told that he was like, we should have seen this before we did the experiments. We could have put the experiments around this, but now we've done the experiments and I'm seeing this data. And so now they've got to edit it all in and do what they're going to do with it. I realized at that juncture that we had given them more than they were ever going to be able to use. The program is what? It's like 43 minutes long. When you include commercials, it's either 38 or 43 minutes long. And my briefing to them was over 5 hours. So wow. Just briefing the data to them and briefing, the methodology and how it was going to be applied was over 5 hours. So it may be picked up and utilized as an enigma penetration capability. As I tried to pitch it to them, it's like, you guys are now following a template which you find successful, because Oak Island has been this thing that they're doing. They're now in their 11th season.
Never found anything.
Never found anything, but gone for 11 seasons. Because why? Because every week, come back next week. Next week it's just enticing.
We found a piece of wood. I think they found a coin. They might have found a coin or something one time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Skinwalker Ranch now is in its 4th season, and it's following essentially the identical template. That's just constant, masturbation, but never getting to orgasm on the thing. It's like just constantly.
Beating a wet noodle.
Yeah, I was just in Oak Island. I think I watched a couple episodes and I was like, I can see where this is going. I'll tune in when they actually find the gold. I'll see that one when they do that, which that's not going to happen. Or
it's
maybe
it's like a reality TV show, basically. Yeah.
So,
entertainment. It's entertainment.
Yeah. And so now Beyond Skinwalker Ranch is following that same template. But what I said is, look, you can see what viewers can produce. 70 viewers, 7 different countries. You guys can keep, drilling holes in the mountain and going, wow, that's really weird. I don't understand why that's that way. Or you can keep saying that, 1.65, hertz frequency, that's an unusual frequency. It's only a space frequency. Travis is correct in saying that, but it's a space frequency because that's the very frequency it's used by the Iridium satellite phones. I mean, there's a reason why you can stand in the Antarctic, or you can stand at the Arctic Circle, or you can be out in the middle of the ocean, or you can be in the deepest jungles of, the Amazon, and you could, and you can pick up that same frequency. It's everywhere because it's a satellite broadcast frequency for sat phones and other things, but that's why it's there. It's not an alien frequency, and it's not a frequency emanating from space that's unusual that it would be any place. It's designed to be everywhere. That's why sat phones and other technologies that are being used that, use that, like emergency transponders and other kinds of stuff, utilize that frequency. So there's entertainment and showmanship that's ongoing with all of that. And I get it. But if you wanted to have a team of remote viewers, albeit not 100% accurate, but to lend some degree of interpretation to what might be in these certain areas that you're attributing to high strangeness and other stuff, clearly the viewers were capable of doing that. And so, we'll see. Maybe they'll just be like, too much trouble, don't like his attitude, or something else. But that's what happened.
Another perfect example of this entertainment thing is the show Ancient Aliens. They do the exact same thing. Every episode is just you watch it, no answers are given, just more questions, more speculation, more theories come up, and then it just like keeps going on along that angle. And I've known several people that have been a part of some of these TV broadcasts on UFOs and extraterrestrials and things like that you're talking about. And almost everything that they said has been cut from the final product. Like it's like what you're talking about. It's like seven minutes there when you did 5 hours, right? So they're not about the truth. They just want entertainment. And
there's this, they are doing sound bites with 2 personalities that are there, and then bringing in all of these different guys to fly drones and shoot rockets and do this other stuff. And, it's a formula that's working for them, but people are starting to get a little bit burned out on it. I think, it's got 3 shows now, all following that same template. And so they took, for Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, they took what the remote viewers did, the 70 remote viewers, and distilled it down to like 7 or 8 minutes. And then actually sent me an email the day that I was doing The Unexplained. It said, we're really sorry, but it was just too much stuff and we couldn't put it in the episode. But we did edit color and time, an 8-minute segment or 7-minute segment, whatever it was. And we're going to put that up on, on our site so people can download that and look at it. And it says, remote viewers, Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, episode 3, whatever that is. So and I think it's on my YouTube channel as well, but don't ask me how to find my YouTube channel. I always forget. It's not what I do. I don't navigate those waters.
Well, we got one question here for you, and then I'm gonna let you go. We got Anonymous wants to know, what was the most interesting SAP program that you've kind of come across slash research? I know that you mentioned that you've been involved in 3, but I guess this question is what is the most fascinating or interesting one that you've known about?
It's a good question. To speak from experience and just not something that I am aware of, but to speak from experience, something I was part of. I think the one that was most fascinating to me, but also the most troublesome to me, troubling, was Torn Image, which was a strategic deception special access program. A strategic deception is, by simple definition, it's basically a deception, a lie that is perpetrated against a real enemy or a perceived enemy of the United States, and it has to be a sustainable lie or deception for at least 10 years. It has to be a sustainable deception for 10 years. I was a counter narcotics. I ran a counter narcotics deception is what I did. And someday when we have more time, I'll tell you about that. That story is on my YouTube channel as well, whatever it is. There are 2 YouTube channels. That has to be davidmorehouse.org, not davidmorehouse.com. I don't own the davidmorehouse.com. I only own the davidmorehouse.org. So that's the one you want to look for. And it says official channel on it. That I do know. That counter narcotics deception is a whole nother story. And it's a real story just kind of filled with intrigue and puzzlement. And if you know the story of Barry Seals, and if you know the story of, Mena, Arkansas, and like Gary Webb, who was, killed a messenger of that story. If you know a lot about the Iran-Contra, if you understand a lot about crack cocaine in Los Angeles, if you understand where we were with the 3 major Colombian drug cartels at that particular era, this is a story you might like to hear.
Well, I'll have to bring you back on sometime in the future to go over that one, because I'm very interested, and I suspect it has something to do with the people that you've mentioned, having to do with drugs and having people war with each other over drugs, something to do with cartels.
Inter-cartel war. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks so much for being on the show, Dave. It was an honor and a privilege to have you back on. Could you reiterate where people can find you online? You just mentioned davidmorehouse.org, not .com, and you have a YouTube channel as well. I think I got your .org website in the description of the video, but I don't have your YouTube in there.
The website's not up yet, but it's a new website that's being done. So just waiting for a couple more pieces to be plugged into that. It's a nice one. But the YouTube channel, davidmorehouse.org, that's what's on there, and it'll say official channel.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone in the chat. It was fun being here with all of you guys. I will be back on Thursday with covering UFO cults part 6, UFO doomsday cults part 6. That one's going to be a really interesting show. It goes very deep on the Love Has Won cult, which happened right here in Colorado. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel in the algorithm, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon as well. You never know when I'm going to do these shows. It could be any day. It could do another one tomorrow. You never know. But thanks everyone for being here. See you guys next